We had a last minute scheduling problem this week, so we did not actually get to record with Dave and I like we planned. We will be back next week. Instead, I'm here to offer you the Contextual Electronics podcast. Now on episode 15, I took a big break to support my wife during our child being born. I hope you enjoy it. It's a slightly different podcast. You know, I'm trying to cover people maybe that aren't 30-year veterans of electronics, but people that are doing stuff that are new and dynamic, and just trying to find people all throughout the spectrum of electronics. And so if you like it, there's actually another feed that you can go subscribe to. You won't get this normally on the Amp Hour, but once in a while there might show up if we're having scheduling problems. This week it's Zack Freedman. You'll hear him here, and Void Star Labs is a great YouTube channel. Contextual Electronics is still a thing. It's still ongoing. It's an online course to teach you more about how to do layout, and there's some new stuff on there like how to be a consultant and how to design a cellular and Bluetooth board. That's something that I did last year, so check that out if you're interested. If not, here, enjoy the Contextual Electronics Podcast, episode 15, crossing over into the Amp Hour, episode 550. This is the Amp Hour Podcast, released July 18th, 2021. Episode 550. Finishing Prototypes with Zack Freedman. Welcome. I'm here today with Zack from Void Star Labs. Zack, how you doing? And
I'm all right.
What you been up to and what you been building lately? I mean,
that was a nice musical transition there. That's slick. Yeah. Welcome to Void Star Lab. What have I been building?
I mean, that's what I think about for you. I mean, you are a builder. You are a guy putting stuff out in the world and making physical objects. So, what have you been building lately?
There are a lot of projects going on. Even more now that I'm streaming all the time. The main thing I've been working on though is a new computer. A few weeks ago, so I do everything off. I built this gaming computer a while ago. I do everything off of it, and a few weeks ago it melted down. One of the liquid cooling tubes came loose, and it was a whole thing. So I had to run off to a certain electronics store and buy a bunch of parts and rebuild this computer from scratch. And I finally just worked out the last kinks, and now I'm doing a video on it, and it's a whole thing. So you've also got the oscilloscope, the water-cooled $18,000 oscilloscope. We've been hacking away at that in streams. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. I put some internet on my shelves here. Check this out. I put the internet
live demos. That's good. That's good stuff. All right. Still feels like magic, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's funny because I've been building I built lots of projects, right? I built hundreds of projects over the last 10 years or so, but I've never put Wi-Fi in a microcontroller until a few months ago. I just never had a need for it. And now I've got so many of these projects have Wi-Fi in them because I need the ability to control them on stream and stuff.
Yeah, and it's also effectively free with ESP32s or 8266s these days, and yeah.
The ESP32 is sweet. My love for the teensy is well known, but that thing is giving it a run for its money.
Got it. Yeah. So let's talk about you and your background. I mean, so you've been designing stuff, designing products for a long time. How did you kind of get into it? How did you get started into this prototyping mindset and this kind of pushing stuff out in the world mindset?
Well, it started when I was a kid, and I used to play Lego all the time. That's no, don't believe anyone who says that. No, So I went to school for engineering because people told me it would make me money, and people didn't tell me it had so much math in it. So I wasn't doing too well. So basically, I switched to a business degree, and in one of my internships, right, I was working for this company that sort of like a third party app store, and I was in charge of the blog. So I ended up on this site that this blog I've never seen before called Hackaday. And this guy has a heads-up display, right? He built a cybernetic heads-up display. It was the coolest thing ever. So, he used this part from a spy gear, I think it was a spy gear video car. Yeah, it was a radio control car with a camera on it. Yeah. And I went on the website, and the camera was, the thing was in stock. So I decided, you know what, it's $35. I'm gonna wait till I get home, and I'm gonna think this one through. I get home, and it's now out of stock. And it turns out that it's almost always out of stock. Like, that was the first time they ever had one in stock in like 3 years. It's the last time they had it since. And that was it. Like, I'm just like, that's it. I'm gonna build a heads up display if it kills me. So yeah, I grab a coat hanger, pair of video glasses, an Arduino. Very important. I've never used any of these things before. Like, I
Okay.
knew how to
Yeah.
solder from like, engineering lab at school, but I've never really done any serious development of any kind. And somehow I put together this Bluetooth connected heads up display that connected to my phone and, like, showed me like a little compass to a waypoint and showed tweets nearby or something. Anyways, wore it to a meetup. Someone's like, "Hey, would you be interested in joining a hackerspace?" I'm like, "That sounds cool. Yeah, sure, why not?" Turns out he didn't have a hackerspace. He was making a hackerspace. So I
Mm.
founded co-founded a hackerspace, and yeah, built a lot of projects, and people started wanting to pay me for them. So I called off my job search, which yeah, job searching hasn't gotten any easier now, but it wasn't very easy during the 2012 recession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, I called off the job search and took on freelance electronics projects, and that was, yeah, it was like almost 10 years ago. And
And that was just the start of it all, huh?
yeah,
Just
it
this
was,
serendipity into product design, huh?
yeah, it was great. Like, I went to lots of meetups, met people, met clients, went to shows, worked for artists, went to trade shows and stuff, did corporate work. Kickstarter became big, incubators popped up. Uh, and then, we had this pandemic, and I couldn't do any of that anymore. and I, and
Yeah.
I had to find a plan B.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the it's interesting too because it feels like the people I know who are doing electronics design or consulting in New York, it's like there's such a more diverse crowd of, like you said, artists and maybe fashion or just all of the various industries that come together in like a crazy big city like New York that it
New York
might
is a
have.
very unique startup, and I don't want to say startup because it extends beyond that, but it
Hmm.
just has a
Yeah.
very unique culture, especially with respect to California.
Mm.
Like in New York, it's I guess the best way to say it is that there are it's a cliques matter a lot less. Like there are meetups all over the place. There's shows everywhere. People are a lot more comfortable with you just calling them up and saying, "Hey, want to grab a coffee?" So, like, you could fill every, like, all right, when it's not a pandemic, you can you could fill up every night with some sort of meetup or trade show or something, meet different people, and yeah, it's a great place to find and pitch talent, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
there are people in like the startup world, there are engineers, there are artists coming out of like the art schools. You got marketing, finance, entertainment, and it's not like it's not. I don't think it's not very sharply like it's not so sharply delineated, right? Like,
Got
you
it.
know,
Okay.
you can rub elbows with all kinds of people. It was a great place to get clients in to do this. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, does
I
that then also bring in like a unique set of challenges for the constraints that are on a problem? Like an artist might have a different set of constraints than a financial tech company will have, or
Oh yeah. It depends a lot on the project, depends a lot on the context they're making it in, and depends a lot on the individual. Yeah, being a I call myself a prototype developer, but it really comes down, like, exactly what I'm doing depends a lot on the client and the task. For artists in particular, right? Artists are working off a grant, so they always have a fixed, so like at least the ones I've worked with, they always have a fixed amount of money to spend on the entire project, and by the time I get brought in, they have spent a certain portion of it. So it's really resource constrained environment, and
yeah,
there's, for some reason, they always seem to
right,
wait till two
right,
weeks before the show. I don't know why it's always 2 weeks.
right, right. And we need
uh
this thing to light up and spin some motors and just talk over RS-485 and on and on and on and on.
Yeah, except that, like, they were really ambitious, and they're
Mm.
like, okay, so we have these two 12 kilovolt electron guns, and we need you to draw patterns with them on this 8 by 12 foot wall.
Wow.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, so you always have 2 weeks. It's always something really weird like that, and you
Hmm.
always have a certain amount of money to do it. yeah, like let's be it's like it's an artist grant. Like it's not you do the job you do those jobs because they're fun and because you do
Mm.
something neat. Artist jobs are really cool, but I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, there are all kinds of weird things. There's I've done some work on sets. I worked a bit on set of Mr. Robot.
Oh,
Uh,
really? Cool.
yeah, like a lot of the blinky. Have you ever seen any of the servers? Any of the blinking servers? I think
Hmm.
there's this one scene where there's some sort of noise detector and there's a gauge going up. I built the electronics, or I built
That's
some of the
cool.
electronics that ended up in some of those, and I got called in on stage because they have a really demanding like set director, and they wanted those lights to blink in a specific way. So yeah,
Yeah.
and with that, like I got a call. I got a call like, yeah, hey, set director needs you to change the things. I'm like, oh, all right, like you can edit the code like X, Y, and Z. Says no,
Yeah.
she wants you personally to come there. I'm like, oh, all right, like I guess I could, I guess I have some availability. When do you need me? He's like, how close are you to an L train?
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
great.
it's all kinds of different constraints, and then you have like and it's completely different from for instance doing a prototype, like doing a first run prototype or something for a startup, right? Because they
Hmm.
hire a consultant because they haven't like I'm sure you know this because this is your line of work, but
Hmm.
for folks who are aren't, uh you often end up in the situation where you have the idea, you secure the idea, you secure the funding, right? You secure members of your team, but you haven't had time to build, you haven't found your CTO, you haven't built out your tech staff. So you'll hire a consultant to build your product out and keep the process moving until you build out your in-house team.
Yeah.
And those jobs, like they're I not it's not just building the project, right? It's also making sure that I can disengage at any time
Mm.
and someone else can just jump right in. All the documents are there, all the code is sensible. We're not using any crazy parts that they're not going to be comfortable with. So it's entirely different set of constraints. On top of that, the project, like if you're doing something for someone with investors, the project always has to look like it's moving forward.
That's right. Yep.
Investors want to see
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's not just
you have
functionality. It's also like, does it feel good? Does it, like it's this kind of
right.
quasi.
And
Yeah.
also, is it moving forward? So if I know like we got to do some refactoring, I
Hmm.
have to sandbag a feature or two so we can look like we're
Right.
moving forward.
Right. And then at
It's
5 this morning, did an all nighter, bro, and like
yeah, I mean some different clients, different contexts have different amount of heroics.
Hmm.
I generally tried to work less than 9 hours a day,
Mm. That's
but
good.
you never know how it works. It was a lot of fun. I really like how you never really know what you're getting into with each job. It's always something different. On top of that, they're all you never know what kind of skills you'll need. Some of them, like I have to learn to solder under a microscope. Some of them I have to sew.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
so I'm
it's
curious
fun.
about that. So like it feels like these are high pressure environments. It feels like this is something where you're learn maybe not on the job but on your feet, right? You're kind of just really having to adjust as necessary. What are some of those skills that you did end up pulling out of that? Like what, so I hear you talk about the teensy all the time as like as a tool, but I would say there's also like the skill would be where knowing how to apply that tool and knowing how to, slot things into different situations. So what are some other skills that you've pulled out of that?
I mean, when it from freelancing and consulting, like the absolute biggest skills are first off being able to sell yourself,
Mm,
right? Because if you think about it, every single job that I get, I have to convince a fresh person. There sometimes I get a little referral, but basically I'm convincing them that I can do your job,
yeah.
even though I don't necessarily have something like their job to show.
Mm,
So it's kind of like this kind of like that, and it's also it's a way of saying it. Yeah, there's this aspect of being able to sell yourself and being able to act with confidence and then figure it out later.
mm,
Like someone says, yeah, like I need I'm doing this wallet thing and we're not sure if the electronics can fit in the wallet. And I say, oh, like why don't we just 3D print a model of the device and then you can have people put it in their pockets and see how well it fits. And they're like, yeah, sure, that'll be great. And then I leave and I go, all right, I have to get a 3D printer now. True story. That the 3D
Yeah,
printer cost.
that's
Well, we
that's how
might
you got
talk about this
started.
later, but
Yeah, yeah,
3D printing, we might we
yeah.
might we might talk about this later. But the 3D printer cost me $180,000,
Oh my.
uh, or something like that. The guy paid me in Bitcoin, and I needed to sell the Bitcoin on the spot. Like, yeah, I think it was like this was like 8 years ago or something, and he paid me 2.5 Bitcoin to.
Wow,
Not. I think I'm off by an order of magnitude. He
but
paid
still,
me
yeah.
like 2.5 Bitcoin to do it, which at the time I think was like $1,200, and I needed to liquidate most of that so I could buy a replicator too.
Mm.
Like there was someone selling one for cheap, and I needed the cash. Yeah, and if I had held those bitcoins, I would have been able to retire on it or something. Anyways, there's that, and the other thing is pricing. A lot of
Mm.
people have a very difficult time talking about money, negotiating pricing,
Hmm.
and for somebody who does a lot of work on YouTube, that has gone a lot further than I expected because I mean, sponsors and partners are like there's where the money is, and
Hmm.
like luckily I have experience, having these conversations. But I imagine a lot of folks are like, they want to pay me $1,000. Am I worth $1,000? And they
Mm.
don't know that, like, you'd say, all right, but what about 2,000?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Like, what is the absolute level of value? Right. I mean, like maybe it's worth $2,000 to one client, but maybe not to another.
right. And if you haven't dealt with this a lot, you don't always know that, like, if you propose like an insulting, like for instance, an insultingly high amount,
Yeah.
it's not necessary. They're not necessarily going to say like, oh wow, what a jerk, screw this guy. No, they're going to bargain with you,
That's
and
right. That's
but
right.
it's not
Yeah.
something that
Well,
feels
we
natural.
have budget for less than that, or
Right.
yeah.
Right, but it's right, and it's part of this sort of feeling
Mm.
out what folks want, feeling out what's available, having these hard conversations, and also kind of getting ahead of yourself and making promises that you're not sure if you can deliver yet.
Okay. All right.
Sometimes you have to move faster. What's the way of saying it? Is sometimes you have to move faster than you've moved in the past.
Mm. I
Like
usually
it,
say "fake it till you make it" is another way of saying that, but
I'm not being like, I'm not. I don't know. Like on one hand, like an outright deception doesn't last very long.
that's right.
Uh, you can't over the long term pretend, like, just you can't over the long term pretend, something is wrong. Like, you can psych yourself up, but you can't put on a new persona for months on end. On
Mm.
top of that, like, it's it's hard. This is why I'm having a hard time articulating it. Because, like, for instance, I've never done an embroidery project before, right?
Okay.
But I've used sewing machines, I've used sergers, I've done soft circuits. So I'm fairly confident that even if like embroidering this like conductive thread is harder than I expected, I think I'll be able to figure it out without having to push the deadline back. And it's
Mm.
kind of having the confidence to do that, and also to approach the client, knowing that you can approach the client and say like, I thought this job would be a lot easier than it actually was.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's part of the fun. A lot of the skills are translated. On top of that, there's the deadline thing.
Mm.
I'm used to working on bonkers deadlines. Turns out to be very, very important for YouTube.
Okay. Self-set deadlines or actual like externally imposed deadlines.
It's a combination of both, right? Because
Mm.
like it's a combination of both, because you have like the client deadlines. Like sometimes you have an unreasonable deadline, but there's also something unreasonable about the project, so it's worth hitting it.
Mm.
So there's that. Like, okay, I have this project that normally would take me 3 weeks, and I've been given 6 days. How am I going to structure my time here? But
Hmm.
there's the other element of it, which is like, this client told me take as long as you want, but how much time can I actually take on this?
Right.
Like,
Yes. Yeah.
if, how what are the ramifications to the business and to them if I do this in 2 weeks instead of one? And both of those are important for you for content creation in general.
Right.
YouTube especially, because of the cadence at which you're expected to do stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'd imagine that a lot of your audience has changed. Obviously, your audience has changed as a YouTuber, but also your audience has changed in terms of the people that are looking at the output of your work. And it's not necessarily just is does this device serve its purpose, but also now is it done in an interesting way? Is it entertaining, and is the process shown and all that other stuff?
Yeah, yeah. In a way, each video is almost. I've been trying to put a number on this for a while. It's surprisingly hard, of how many projects are actually in a video.
Oh,
Because,
interesting.
like, in a way, we have the thing itself, right? The thing that's shown. We have the video itself, right? The production process of the
Yep.
piece of content. Uh, But then afterwards, if we release the project, right, so other people can make it, that's a project in of itself because it needs
Oh,
instructions, documentation, comments, support,
support.
like
Yep. Yep. Yep.
all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like you could also say there's like an element of if there are other people involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if other people are working on it, there's the relationship management aspect of it. That could be a project. You could even, and on top of that, the project is even probably going to be revisited in the future because things
Well,
break, things,
Well, and you also, it seems like a lot of your builds as well. So if people don't know what we're talking about here, obviously, I introduced Zach as from Void Star
Oh,
Labs. You should
right. Some
check
people are
check out his
listening.
YouTube channel. Yeah, some people are listening, some people are watching. If you haven't, check out his YouTube channel. We'll have videos in here, and we'll have links in all the show notes and stuff like that. But another thing that you do well is you show some of your process, and often there's experiments that kind of build up to the final thing. And so I would almost say those are
Yes.
sometimes sub projects. I mean, you could say that R&D is sort of its own thing, but
Yeah, I talk about, I actually have I talk about this in the YouTube channel, by the way, is youtube.com/Zack Freedman. I've been looking for a good time
right.
to actually formally call it Void Star Lab. Long story about the name.
Got it.
Anyways, I did a video on finishing your projects, and I like, instead of just designing a project and doing it, I like to break it down into like sort of sub assemblies, finish those individually, and then start putting them together. Because the whole
Mm,
idea is that things are going to happen, life is going to get in the way, and you're no project, like it's especially if you don't get to put in all of your weekday hours into it, things are going to get in the way and force you to abandon your project. And
mm,
you always want to get that project to a point where you can stop working and you still have something to show for it. So in a
uh,
way, a project is like a set of projects. Yeah, like I mean, you can even call the code, like the code, its own project. Like, so
sure.
I kind of do it backwards, right? Like for most people, they first I think for most people who build stuff, they first breadboard the circuit, write the code, and then implement the circuit properly, and or yeah, implement the circuit properly and put it in its form factor, put it in, its enclosure or whatever. I start with the enclosure, then add the electronics, then add the code,
Mm.
and then I write the real code. And the whole point of that is that if I have to stop part way, I have something to show for it. Like if
Mm.
using the data glove, for instance, if I had to stop in the first third, I would still have a cool looking glove, and I could wear it to meetups and stuff and tell people it works.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, there might
then
be
I had
something behind the curtain, but that's okay, right?
Yeah, they don't know that.
Yeah.
And then like if I built out the hardware, but I didn't get too far into the software, then
Hmm.
at least it blinks. At least it does something. I can show it working, and I can talk about the possibilities. And then finally, I write some provisional code for it. So now it arguably works. It's arguably done. I could like walk away right now and claim that it's finished. And then I can knuckle down and work out the real code, make all the refinements, really bring it to 100%. And hopefully I can stop during that at any point. I can abandon it and
Mm.
I have something to show for it. Yeah, I think a lot of folks just they get a really ambitious idea, and they think of the kind of like they get a very ambitious idea, and this is something that I don't really struggle with. So, but it's something I try to be sympathetic to. A lot of folks get an idea and they think it's the last good idea they'll ever have.
Mm.
So a lot of
Interesting.
folks feel compelled to get it down and do it exactly the way they think through, and they don't want to tell anyone about it, right? They don't want to stop part way. Like they don't like they think this is the last good idea they're ever gonna have. They have to get it down and cut it out of whole cloth. Um, and that's not true. Like
Mm.
first off, yeah. I mean, there are a lot
Yeah,
of ways. There are a lot of ways not true, but
I feel like the especially like the traditional engineering education kind of thing is kind of bottom up, and it's like, oh well, we're going to start from transistors and we're going to build up to this thing and then the next thing and then the next thing and then eventually you write code and whatever, right? And I feel like in my own life I've done that too, where I'm like, oh well, I'm starting a new project, I need to start with a circuit board or start at the circuit, whereas it would have been just as easy to go and grab a dev board and glue a bunch of them onto a piece of
yeah,
cardboard, wire stuff together, and then prove out the idea first and then revise it and then step it back. That's
right.
kind of that top down versus bottom up type of thing.
a big part of the prototyping, kind of the prototyping mindset, if you will. It sounds kind of pretentious when I say it that way, but a big part of
It's
the
really more of a
process.
method. It's
Yes.
if you buy my tapes, you can check out my
Oh
method.
yeah, I got to do an ebook, right, for passive income. Isn't that what I'm
That's right.
supposed to do at this stage in my career?
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you buy my ebook, the first chapter is free. Anyways, the so the prototyping mindset, you're not thinking like, I feel like in a sort of engineering or inventor mindset, it's sort of like what builds off what. In the prototyping mindset is, let's figure out everything that goes into this project and rank it in descending order of how risky it is, how likely
Mm.
it is to fail, how little I know about it, right?
Hmm.
Like just let's rank it in terms of unknowns, because you want to do the unknowns first. Like if you're not sure if, for instance, you'll be able to fit a piece of electronics into a glove, you got to do that first, right? Like if you're not sure if a certain sensor will be able to pick up a given like a given method, or you're not, like do that. If you like a microcontroller but you've never used it before, you better not do anything at all until you get your butt into an IDE and make sure you can actually write code for that microcontroller. Uh,
Yeah.
like you have to do the stuff. Basically, you gotta find all the band-aids, rip them off. You gotta find all the rocks with bugs under them and turn them over. You gotta find all the you gotta find all the parts, all the pain points, and stick pencils in them. You have to go aggressively, go out and find anything that could possibly go wrong, anything you don't know, anything that scares you, anything
Mm.
that scares the client, and immediately do all of that.
Mm.
Because the basically the way a prototype fails is it doesn't come together fast enough.
Yes,
And
system
the
integration is by far the hardest part of any project, and it's usually this.
right.
If you do the Gantt chart, it's like this little bit at the end. It's like, oh, and we'll stick together the board and the software and the mechanical, and it'll work. But what's the problem?
Well, generally the thing that throws off your schedule, the thing that messes all that up, it's not that the entire project comes apart. Like people say things, like you'll say something to the boss, oh, it turned out to be a lot harder than we expected. But it's generally like one part. Like,
Mm.
oh, I thought we could easily cross compile Python 3 into this like Yocto distro. But it turns out that that tool chain is really hard to use. So we had to do it, so we had to like add it in a different way, which cost us 3 weeks, right? Even stuff like, oh, I thought I would be able to write C++ code on this Raspberry Pi 2040, but it turns out I have to use Python, and I didn't know Circuit Python and MicroPython were different, so I just blew my deadline.
Yeah. Right.
Uh,
Right. Yeah.
it's all stuff like that. Like you have to suss out the unknowns.
Yeah. So,
It,
and how do you start to rank them though? I mean, that's always the thing that I run into is like, is it just best guess, and then you're just running through them?
well, how do I rank it? Well, the first thing is gotta check your gut, right? Because
Sure.
like if you're anything like me, like are first off, like you're gonna have things that you don't want to do, right? Like,
Oh
and,
yeah.
and those you
Totally.
definitely want to write those down. If you don't want to do it, there's a reason.
Yes.
Um, next thing, the next thing is basically like I sort of like think of each part that goes into it. I sort of try to break it down hierarchically, right? So if using the glove, for instance, that's going to
Mm.
involve a glove. It's going to have some sensors. It's going to have something to hold the sensors. Going to have some electronics, wireless, maybe a motor.
I'm gonna
Gonna
play this
stick
in the
that.
background too, so we could see the glove that you're talking about here.
Yeah, this
As,
this
as,
is
as you're
this is
doing
the
it.
first data glove. It's the P5.
Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
if you can start by modifying something off the shelf instead of building it all yourself, you can actually save a lot of time on it. So I
Mm.
started this data glove project by modifying it off the shelf one. There's things like for instance, this thing is going to detect gestures, right? So is the sensor data coming off like usable? What
Mm.
format is it in? Is it quaternions or is it Euler angles?
Mm.
Right? What's the math involved in that? I want to use a neural network. Can I train a neural network? Can I get a neural network onto the glove? Like all these things. None of these, by the way, involve actually building the project. These are all
Mm.
things that are worth testing individually in isolation, because if a single one doesn't line up, the entire project is screwed.
Right.
Like I fired up TensorFlow on my laptop and I just deployed a TF Lite TF Lite model to a Teensy. Doesn't matter.
Hmm.
Didn't matter what it did. I just have to make sure it's practical. Like for a wearable project, I'll build models out of cardboard and wire and stuff to, that's all. This is also why I like building the enclosures, build the non-electronics part first, because I have to know how much space I have to put electronics in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and
It's all,
so when you're
yeah.
doing all this like wearable type stuff as well, I mean, are you trying to also get a feel for like usability or like kind of
That's
the
still
other
ball of wax.
yeah.
Oh man, well, when it come, I mean, I'll tell you about where this applies to all kinds of usability, but it's very prominent in wearables. I learned this in wearables.
Hmm.
You need the entire thing to evaluate usability. You
Hmm.
can't build a usability. You can't really build a usability prototype. Usability and user experience are affected by so many factors that it's really impossible. Like, for instance, I had this idea a long time ago to make a sort of a heads up display for bikers, right? You'd, instead of having a watch or a thing on your handlebars, you wear a heads up display.
Hmm.
So I built a prototype heads up display. It was a helmet with a bunch of wire and stuff stuck to it, and I brought it to bike meetups, and I said, hey, what do you think of this? I brought it to biking and running meetups. I said, hey, what do you think about this device? And people were like, well, is it going to look like that?
Yeah.
you, you can't get accurate feedback without something that people think is the real thing.
Hmm.
So unfortunately, you have to, for stuff like that, you have to pick projects that, even if they're worthless, are still worthwhile. The Data
Yeah.
Glove, stuff like this is why I like wearables, right? Because
Hmm.
even though nearly all wearables are either useless or a worse, or like, you'd be better off not making a wearable.
Hmm.
They still inspire people. People's minds fill in the gaps. I don't need to explain what you do with it, because people will think
Hmm.
of that for themselves. And that also disclaims me of making false claims. On top of that, making something genuinely useful is really hard.
Yeah. Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's like bolting technology onto people now. It's like, okay, well, do I really need this? I
Yeah.
mean, like, I'm trying to bike here, man. Or
The other aspect of the prototyping process is that for the other part of the prototyping process is that the end product, basically what you're making when you're prototyping most of the time, is a decision to kill the idea.
Hmm.
The role of most prototypes is to show that an idea is unworkable, because most ideas are unworkable. Like,
Okay.
it's just force of numbers. If you prove out an idea, odds are you're going to discover it's not worth making. And that's why you made a prototype instead of just jumping straight into product development.
Okay. So tell me a
Uh,
little bit more about this then. So you're trying to kill an idea, but then
right.
what makes you keep going after that? Like, why?
All right. Well,
Yeah.
okay.
Go
So
ahead.
it's different for. All right. So, like, it's different for making a side projects
Okay.
for content, and professional projects are different in this
I
respect. But
could
in
I
terms of
could I could
professional
see if
projects,
I was gonna say, could I guess that the professional projects, is it because someone comes to you and says, we really want to do X, and then you're saying, no, you don't.
yeah, I mean, I'll say that, but the odds of someone actually listening to it
Sure.
are not high.
Well,
I,
maybe you say you don't want to do it like that though, right? Maybe you say you don't want to do it in this form factor, and let's try these other things.
I'll try to say it more like, if we made it like this, you'd be able to test a few more assumptions,
Mm,
and
yeah.
you'd be able to get more pointed feedback,
Mm,
right? Like,
yeah. 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 That's great.
it's a more it's
That's
all
very diplomatic.
it's
Yeah,
diplomacy.
you're very much better at this than I am. Apparently, I'm just like, nah, bad idea.
It took a lot of falling on my face.
Yeah.
It took a
Yeah.
lot of cringe that keeps me up at night.
Mm,
Anyways, the thing you want for a professional prototype is that people try to buy the prototype.
I've had that. Yep.
If people try to buy or steal your prototype, you are onto something. At the end of the day, you are making a device so that somebody sacrifices money to get the device. That's the
Mm,
purpose. Look, that's why you're making the product. Like, you're making the product so that somebody can turn money into more money. If that person could make more money investing in meme stonks, they'd be investing in meme stonks. They can make more money, smelting cars for scrap, they'd be smelting cars for scrap. The whole
mhm.
idea is to try to get people's money. So, like, if people try to buy the prototype, that is exactly what you want. That's why it's also helpful to try to make the prototype at least presentable as the real product, because then people think it's something that's for sale. You'll
Mm,
get that feedback. It's really hard to suss that out otherwise.
mm. So,
I
so,
mean, there's
so,
a
what are some
lesser
of those
version.
elements that would make that be that next level, right? You had said so far. You've said you want people to like to be real enough for people to buy it. It has to have these levels for people to like think it's a thing and give you true feedback on
Yeah.
it. But then does that like fit and finish, or is that like is that
Hmm.
presentation, or what does that look like as a a prototype being a more real thing.
It's I mean, those are aspects. You're right, but like those are aspects of it. Like, but they're like like the fit and finish, the functionality, the way it behaves, the story you tell about it.
Yeah.
They're all elements of verisimilitude. Basically, it has to be
Big word.
it's like internally consistent. Like
Mm,
the parts of it all have to make sense. For instance, if it's let's say it's a fitness wearable, right? It has to be small enough that it makes sense that you could run in it, right?
right. Yeah.
It has
It's
to have a
like,
user
and just
experience that
just take this car battery and put it on your shoulder, and then you get this
right.
little LED on your face.
Exactly. Like it has to it doesn't that doesn't mean it has to be like as small and thin as it would be in real life. It just has to be small enough that it makes sense that you could wear this and run.
Hmm.
Right? The UI needs to look like a running UI. Maybe it has like a
Mm,
little speedometer on it. Maybe it has like a picture of a person running and a picture of a person running behind it. So you chase them. And you tell a story and you have like a story to tell that's consistent with it, right? Like you put this on, you hit the button, fires a starting gun and off you run. You get to race yourself from yesterday.
mm,
So none of these features have to work, right? Like that little guy can always trail, like it can just make a random walk behind the one that represents you.
mhm,
Like none of it has to work. It just has to look sensible.
mm,
It all has to be internally consistent. It all has to work together.
mm.
Like basically you don't want people saying, why is this here? Why, like, what's this do? Because it should
Right.
all make sense.
So there's some aspect of minimalism then as well, like not overdoing it, not being like throwing all the features at the wall and seeing what sticks, that kind of idea.
Right. Right. On top of that, the more things you try to test at once, the worse feedback you're going to get about
Mm,
any of them.
yeah.
On top of that, you'll also the more features you try to test at once, the more things you throw at someone, the more feedback will be how the features relate to each other
Mm,
instead of whether each individual one is worth making.
okay.
It's yeah, it's kind of it can be tricky, and it's not something that you it's something that takes iteration. You have to try over and over again. The
Mm.
to do a really excellent prototype, the a number of people you need to test it is astronomical. Ideally, you want to
What's that number? 100? 1,000?
for a consumer product, you're probably gonna by the time it goes to market, you probably will have exposed it to like a few thousand new people.
Wow.
If you're
Okay.
assuming you're dotting your i's, crossing your t's, and really going crazy, at the
Hmm.
very least, every one of your friends and family, and as many of their friends and family as you can get, will have seen some version of it, because you have a limited ability to use the same person twice, right?
Mm.
Because they
Yeah.
take things they know about it before and bring it in.
Mm.
And you have to be careful because some testing groups just aren't very numerous, especially if you're doing something like style related.
Hmm.
You can only show it to so many people to get their thoughts before you know you before like you start to hear an echo.
Mm.
Style and stuff, that's another ball of wax entirely. But yeah, at
The
the end of the day, what you want is you want people to either at like the strong version is they try to buy the prototype. The
Okay.
weak version is they don't want to give it back to you. They want to keep
Okay.
using it, and they say like, hey, you saw that thing that like lets me race against a virtual person. Can I borrow that? I'm training for a 4K.
Huh.
Like then you know it's good.
Yeah. That's great. That's great.
At the end of the day, like like a good product is one that convinces people to make sacrifices for it, because that's what buying something is. In a way that holds for content too, because every time someone watches my video, they're not watching someone else's video.
Mm. You're saying it's
So,
a battle of the fittest amongst the electronics YouTubers and such.
well, I mean, it's about it's well, I mean, sort of,
Yeah, I
but
mean, it's
I
attention
also
economy, right?
I also get the ability. Remember, like I also get the ability to kind of select who I'm fighting against,
Mm.
right? Like I get to kind of pick which arenas I'm playing in. As for electronics, I'm an electronics builder, but I don't actually do a lot of my videos about electronics, and the electronics in my videos tends to be very lightweight because electronics is first off, it's very time consuming. So
Sure.
it's really hard to make, especially things involving like a circuit board. I haven't made any custom circuit board since I started the channel. I used to make circuit boards for every one of my
I th-
projects.
no, wait. I thought you did for the glove. The not
The
the sorry, not the glove. The wrist computer. I
the
thought that thing had it.
all the projects involving custom circuit boards were made before I started the channel. They were
Oh,
completely
interesting.
finished before I started the channel. I I don't I don't talk I don't I try to be a little unclear about a lot of time frames to give myself
Hmm.
more flexibility to use old projects now.
Mm.
But if you think about it, like even if like let's say like I'm using advanced circuits here in Colorado, and I
Mm.
convince them to let me drive to Aurora and pick them up myself, that's still 3 days just to get the circuit board, assuming I'm paying $500 per.
Mm.
Like
That's yeah, yeah.
that's unworkable. It can't be done. It's too slow.
Oh, you're saying because of the iteration cycle. Okay, okay. And you're not
Yeah,
using
I
like
mean,
rapid prototyping tools like other mill or something like that.
yeah,
It's
I don't have access to stuff like that. So that's
mm,
why so many of the projects involve 3D printing, because 3D printing is fast enough that I can
got it.
actually do it on the 1 week schedule of building projects for the channel.
Got it. So that's
It's
another thing that we're learning about you is that from idea to a video output, it is that 1 week cycle. It's not like paralleled. Well, there might be some parallel stuff, but it's not necessarily just that.
just to bring home what we were talking about before. I decided to pick my fight with 3D printing. I decided
Okay.
that the channel is going to be like projects on a high level and 3D printing on a low level, because on a
Mm,
high level people just love seeing cool stuff.
yes.
And but the thing I get technical about is 3D printing, because there are a lot of 3D printing channels out there, but there really aren't any of them that are totally gangbusters. There's no electro boom of 3D printing. There's no Styro Pyro. There's no Michael Reeves. There's no Colin Firth. So it's a battlefield that I can actually fight in.
So you're saying it? Yeah. So a lot of the 3D printing channels I see are like the ones where they're like Joel is doing like reviews, and there's other people that do that.
Yeah, there's
Makers,
Maker's
yeah,
Muse and CNC
Makers
Kitchen that
Muse.
get very technical.
Yeah.
There's things
Right.
like Wild Rose builds that make that
Hmm.
just show the process,
Hmm.
but none of them are real like category killers. Because like the whole thing, what you want with YouTube here, like I've got my YouTube theories.
Okay. Here
What
we
you
go.
really want with YouTube is you want to get a chain going. You want someone to see one of your videos and then they get
Hmm.
recommended another and another and another and another.
Hmm.
And I suspect that the more popular your competition is, the more likely YouTube will show the person one of their videos.
Huh.
So at the end of
Interesting.
the day, like that's what I want. I like it's if if I want to get a million views, I can either get a million views in a video, or I can get 300,000 views ish on 3 videos, and it's a lot easier to do the second when you're new.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah, that's kind
That's
of so
that's very
like
strategic. That's like a reverse engineering of what you know about videos and you makers
my
and
my approach
yeah.
to YouTube has been very strategic. Before I even started writing my first video, I spent about 2 straight weeks just uh, conducting research, looking at things on Social Blade,
Mm,
tracking new videos to see if my predictions actually played out, just getting an idea of how the system works on a high. Like the system is unscrutable, but it definitely has some patterns.
mm.
And
Any other secrets you drew out of there that you're willing to share?
I mean, there. Oh man, I could talk about YouTube game theory for millennia. But I think some of the big ones are, first, you have to make all your videos bangers. They all have to be consistent quality.
Mm,
You can't have people say like I don't like, for instance, and this isn't a slight against any particular channel, because like again, I don't know the strategic dynamics of anyone for sure. But for instance, using 3D printer channels as an example, some of them do things like can you print with weed whacker line, like really neat, cool stuff
mm.
that is going to draw eyeballs.
Yeah.
And they mix it in with videos like let's review the XYZ cubic
The printer was
Boss
sent
Man
to me.
20.
Right. We need a video this week,
Right.
right?
There are
Yeah.
far fewer people who want to watch a review video than want to
Mm,
watch an interesting experiment.
mm,
And that I think releasing that video would be a net negative for the channel, because it
mm.
reduces your average view count. That's a video that can't show up or start a chain, because unlikely that people are going to,
Right.
because like it's unlikely that people who watch your other popular videos are going to also get recommended and then watch that. Remember, all it takes is a person to click away once during any of your videos at any point, and you've broken the chain.
Huh.
Uh,
Yeah.
so like,
This is great theory. This is really interesting. I mean,
so you
but
want to
both
make
as a
sure.
viewer and I, as a subpar maker myself.
Ah, well, I don't think the second thing is production quality counts. It's not everything.
Mm,
Production quality counts, and basically like the second YouTube theory of the Zack is that the table stakes, basically what it takes to put your chips on the table, is you need excellent audio, you need your videos to be tightly cut and fast moving and well paced, and
Yep.
you need to be charismatic.
Yep.
As for actually what you put in the video, the content, like that's up to you. You pick your content based on a combination of what you can be charismatic about and what people want to see, and also what you can do practically. Let's
Yeah,
see. There's
the charismatic part is interesting too, because we talked about that beforehand. I said, I had mentioned to you that like you've been, over the from the beginning of your channel to now, like you've been kind of developing this persona or been shaping it more. And I said I wasn't sure if it's actually just the more authentic Zach coming out, or if it's you getting more comfortable in front of the camera, or you developing this persona. But I think that is really important, because if I walked up to you at a meetup, I'd expect, effusive, well scripted, funny, sarcastic type of comments, because that's what I'm used to watching Zach doing, and it being around electronics and 3D printing and all these other things.
so with when you're doing something like YouTube, or really anything public, but especially something that can be scripted, you're sort of playing yourself but amped up to 11.
That's right. Yep. Yeah.
The main difference between my all right, so I initially tried YouTube a few years ago,
Mm.
right? I started my channel 4 years ago, and I left those first two videos up for historical reasons, but they're awful. And those videos I did in the traditional maker YouTuber style, which is that I showed myself, I showed my face for maybe a scene or two, but otherwise I'm doing a voiceover.
Mm.
And so then for the first few videos on the channel, I scripted the videos, and I was trying to do that in a different YouTuber style, right? Which is memorize a couple lines, say the lines, memorize a few lines, say the lines.
Yeah.
And then when the channel really kind of like got its footing, when I started using the wearable display as a teleprompter, because then I could make the scripts as intricate and crazy as I could want. And because I see all the stuff right in front of my face, like normally with the teleprompter, you're not prompting yourself with the exact script, right? Because it's not that easy to read every single word. But with the wearable, I can make the most elaborate script I can think of, and then read it up, rattle it off perfectly word by word. So that's when everything kind of got to. That's when the gap closed between the writing and the talking. I'm a much better writer than I am an improv artist. So that's when it really caught on. The problem with the first, right? This is another part. This is another bit of YouTube tech for anyone listening. The problem with the first approach, right? Reading, not doing talking head, is that it multiplies the amount of B-roll you need. Basically, without the ability to point the camera at yourself, you have to film something interesting for
like
every single scene.
Right.
Nothing. So when I talked about pacing before, pacing is so important. Your script has to move bang, 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 bang. If you're watching the video here, Chris isn't skipping forward through my video. This is the actual pace of the video. No cut really lasts longer than 2 or 3 seconds. They're all different. I do maintain, proper blocking. I'm always on the left side of the screen, all that good stuff. But like, you have to keep things moving, because again, the moment the pace drags, people are going to click off and you're done.
They got something else going on, right? They gotta go do that, right?
And if you think about it, that means that you need to film like hundreds of shots if you're not putting your face on it, because people can hold attention much longer than stuff. It's cheating. So that's the problem with the first one. The problem with the second one is that first off, if you're memorizing lines and then kind of riffing on them, first off, I'm not very good at that. A lot of people just aren't. I can't memorize things that fast. I'm not a memorizer. But you're also rarely as funny like off the cuff as you are with unlimited time to prepare. And on top of that, it's really hard to cut a video like that. It takes a long time to cut all those little mini takes together, and time is, especially if you're building a project, right? Like, time, you need every second you can get. I like the teleprompter approach because it closes the gap between because it gives you lots of footage that you can use to pad out the the project and stuff, and it closes the gap completely between the writing room and the studio.
Right. And it still maintains the persona, I feel like, too, of Zach the narrator, Zach the effusive person that's in front of the camera telling you about this thing he's passionate about. So that helps too.
Yeah. What's funny is that the wearable teleprompter and what you're talking about, the effusiveness, I tend to be very animated. Not not when I'm doing a podcast though, because I have a boom mic here, and if I hit it, the shot's ruined.
It's all over, man. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, those two things are the most common things that people, I don't want to say complain about, because it's much more hostile. Those are the things that people most common attack me for. Uh, like I'm of all the negative comments, like, all right, on 3D printer videos, the most common negative comment is, dude, you got to tune up your 3D printer. You got strings and your layers are inconsistent. I'm like, who cares? I don't have time for that crap. But on other videos, yeah, the most common one is like, yeah, I really want to like your videos, but like that wearable computer just like, it just breaks on it. Just I just can't. I can't respect you unless I can look you in the eye. Like you seem like a smart person, so I don't know why you'd think it was a good idea to wear the wearable. These are actual comments, by the way.
Oh, I don't doubt it. I mean, yeah, YouTube knows no depths. There's, I mean, some, yeah, community can be great, right? But it's, there's also the.
I'll return to that in a sec. But the hand, like, another common comment is like, yeah, I love your videos, but I have to listen to them because your hand gestures make me want to fly to Colorado and murder you. In language that made it automatically filtered out by YouTube. That said, for anyone listening who's thinking of doing this yourself, the YouTube comments have been far more positive and far less hostile than I expected by orders of magnitude. I expected, like, we're talking, like, when I say this, like, I'm talking like on an average video, I'll get like 5 to 10 truly nasty comments, and maybe another 5 to 10 comments that come off as nasty, but are more likely the person saying them has, impaired social ability. I was expecting, like, I'd expect that, like, 60%, hundreds of comments would be just pure right, vile spite just
poured into your ears, hatred. And you just be like, oh wow,
it's not nearly that
garbage, bad, according to the internet.
Yeah, it's not nearly that bad. But at the end of the day, look, what people say doesn't matter. What people say doesn't matter. What the analytics page says matters. What your bank statement says matters. If people, people could be
right. That's right, folks. He said he was a business major, and there we go.
I made it very clear. I'm in this for the money.
Yeah.
I make that joke, but then I go ahead and, like, stay up till 5 o'clock, building new water cooling for a finished oscilloscope project because I just really want to put it on my desk. I just really like building stuff. Anyways, yeah, it's not nearly as bad as you think. The bad one, the worst social media is by far Twitter, but Maker Twitter tends to be very friendly.
I found that as well.
I would go so far as to say, yeah, you've experienced with this. Maker Twitter is oddly friendly.
Like creepy friendly, like come on, okay.
No, like I don't know where the lines are, right?
Ah, okay.
Because you've things like gender equality Twitter is hyper hostile, and if you step 1 millimeter out of these very sharp lines, you're gonna be knocked off the internet with a firestorm. But Maker Twitter, like, you really have to push far for anything, for you to hear anything. It's very low drama, very chill. Which
I think when I get to meet anyone from Maker Twitter in real life, it's instant friendship. So that has been very positive.
The Maker community is super friendly. It definitely helped buoy the channel early on, because just I got so many people who I've, like, I didn't even know knew me, right? Like, people who, like, saw my name on Hackaday or built my projects or things, like, promoting the show, and an extra 1,000 views or so early on makes a huge extra 1,000 views or so early on makes a tremendous difference. But it's a real business. I'll tell you this, I've never worked harder in my life. Like, high school, college, job, finding work during a recession, none of them even approach how difficult this is as a career.
And so, well, that's an interesting question. So, I mean, are you I mean, you're in this full time. You're doing this thing,
Yep.
putting your stuff
Yeah,
out there. Are
I'm a
you
full-time YouTuber.
are you ever
I'm the most in-demand job among children.
among the Utes? Yeah,
The Utes.
yeah, the
The
Utes
Utes
of
who say
America.
yeet.
Yeah. Uh, so any thought to go back to prototyping ever? I mean, or just for yourself? I mean, you are your own
I
customer now.
mean, that depends. I mean, that depends on it depends on circumstances outside my control. Like
Mm.
right now it's not practical to find clients because, you know, pandemic. So I don't
Well, I'd
know
imagine they'd start finding you through YouTube though too. So that's another interesting thing.
to an extent. To an extent. There's also the pot. Yeah, on top of that, like the world that I kind of like the world has changed a lot since I started doing this. Right when I got into
Mm.
when I got into the prototyping business, it was, you know, like kind of the peak of the. It was like near the end of the 2012 tech bubble, but it was kind of the peak of the hardware startup tech bubble. Like this is where
Mm.
Fitbit was making the news, Pebble,
Yes, that's right.
Kickstarter companies were going crazy. Nest was make. This was before Nest was acquired. This was Nest making a name for itself.
Yeah.
Google was releasing hardware products for the first time. Like this was a real hardware startup boom. And there's also a lot of money going around to the art scene because, like, you know, the world wasn't nearly as on fire and people were doing things like, you know, making art that other people wanted to see, other people could look at without crying.
Hmm.
And basically it was a perfect storm to get into. But now that's cooled off a lot. There are fewer people doing companies. Of the ones who are doing startups, more of them are doing software or like, you know, financial tech.
Hmm.
uh there are, you know, there are fewer artists, and of the ones who are left, their needs are being met more and more by art school students who've graduated and couldn't
Oh,
find work.
interesting. So like art school
Yeah,
students who have this prototyping capability as well, and they can kind
well,
of.
who will work for free.
Oh, okay, that too. Sure.
Yeah, the world, let's just say, like, it favors things with a higher gross profit a lot more. um
Mm.
Not to say it's impossible, right? Like, you know, not to say it was impossible, but it's still a different world. So
Mm.
I think there's a real question of whether, even if there weren't a pandemic, if my hand would have been forced to do something or other.
Oh, interesting.
But that said, like,
What
it's
about the prototyping tools? I mean, do you feel like the stuff that you talk about, like the Teensys of the world and the
oh
ESP32s,
man,
are they are things
oh,
getting
they've never been
easier?
better.
Yeah, are they getting easier? So does that also impact like who might be doing the kind of work that you started doing?
Well, I mean, let's. I guess I would say it like this: like the tools are easier, especially when you're trying to build connected devices. It's become a lot easier
Hmm.
to make things with Bluetooth, things with Wi-Fi, things that provide their own connection with Cell or LoRa or something. You know, like there are a lot more tutorials out there. 3D printers have become easier to use. Prototype, like the tools are better, but I would argue that when I got into it in 2012, the tools had already crossed that threshold where they were easy enough.
Mm,
Like
okay.
I'm not an engineer, right? Like I'm not an engineer. I'm not very good at, I don't have a huge body of knowledge. I'm not very good at knuckling down and studying. I've tried to read The Art of Electronics. I make a mark in it every time I try to read it. And as right now it has, I think 12 marks.
Mm.
And I've never
Yeah,
got
but
past the third chapter.
people who trying to read it cover to cover is just
Well, I mean, you try to learn it properly, like do all the work, you know, do all
oh,
the
like I see, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
the
like
exercises and
do
stuff.
all the exercises, right, solve all the proofs, and I
Hmm.
just can't. And if I can do this job, anyone, like really anyone can do this job.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's become easier, but has become to a point where it substantially improves how accessible it is. I don't know. It's still expensive.
Mm.
Um, you know, it's still a very expensive hobby. The tools are basically the same in terms of, you know, like soldering irons, CAD software, etc. Um, you know, like when I got into this, the maker movement. Oh man, I wish I had a giant foam fingers so I could properly air quote maker movement.
Yes,
The maker movement,
the
what's
maker
so
movement.
called, was in full
All rights
swing.
reserved by O'Reilly Media.
Yeah, that was in full swing. So every company was like making stuff to appease makers.
Mm.
So like there were a lot of tailwinds. I don't think that I think this is more of a supply issue. I think I mean, let's be honest. Like, we were in a prolonged recession, and yeah, look, we're in a prolonged recession. We were before we got into the not to depress all the viewers and listeners, but yeah, we were before the pandemic. It was hidden by businesses doing well, but those businesses aren't hiring consultants, or at least they're not hiring single one man armies to build their electronics. So I don't know. Most of my clients near my biggest clients near the end were all like industrial stuff, like HVAC controllers, kiosks, things of that sort. So
yeah, I mean, I love the industrial space too. I think it's interesting because you have mentioned a lot of like consumer level or like wearables. I think about that, and just like the feedback mechanism you mentioned. Like,
yeah, I mean, those are the
people
projects I have the best stories about.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, who cares about like, it's like, oh, I improved the efficiency of an axle inside a John Deere tractor. It's like, it's cool, but like, it's probably not easy to talk about, right? Or
look, I think yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like, on one hand, yeah, it's kind of unsexy, but on the other hand, I think people make this harder. Like, the maintenance and incremental improvement, like it is important and it pays off. Like, that is the important
that's money,
part of engineering.
Right. That's where the money comes
from.
It's not just
money. That's what moves humanity forward. Like, but like, it's not sexy when it's not. I think the challenge is a lot of people think of the tech, like in terms of like incremental improvement, maintenance tasks and whatnot. People think a lot of like the stuff, right? But like, oh, we made this type of rebar that makes concrete 20% stronger. Like, that sound like, okay, fun, all right, whatever. But instead, it's smarter to say we made concrete that enables trucks to travel through lesser used roads. That enables trucks that usually would have crumbled bridges under them to cross those bridges, which reduces traffic and means that you don't have to pass as many big rigs on your commute. Like, we enabled like our concrete is like we built this this new rebar enabled this little island that formerly had to have everything flown in to have things trucked in, and that means that these folks now get to go to a supermarket for the first time in their lives. Like, you got like the incremental improvements and all that stuff. It allows thresholds to be crossed. Even it's, I think folks are sometimes get a little too focused on the technology and not enough on the purpose of the technology. Yeah.
In what way though? So in terms of the what people put money towards or where funding goes and that sort of thing?
Yeah, like if someone says like I don't know, like using that, and also where the attention goes. I call it the Scoble effect. This idea that technology is intrinsically cool.
Like the Google Glass in the shower thing?
Yeah. I have Scoble stories. My path has crossed with him a number of times. Okay. And I'm not going to tell any of them because you never know when Scoble will be listening. But he's very he finds technology itself intrinsically interesting. And I don't like, it's not the technology, it's what the technology enables. It's what it does. A wearable computer does nothing. It's like, okay, what does it do? Can you wear it during class to improve your grades? Can you use it as a teleprompter to allow you to say these super intricate scripts that you couldn't otherwise do?
Could you wear it in a factory to do in situ repairs by scanning a QR code or something?
Gotta go even deeper than that. Like, what does it do? Does it let the guy clock out an hour early? Does it allow the warehouse to fire 20% of the staff? It's got to go. It's not about the technology. It's about the effect on the world. I feel like that's another thing I think that separates. Another thing that I found. I don't want to like. I'm not like other girls. I don't mean it like that. I just mean like a difference in mentality. Like, I have never built a project because I wanted to. With very few exceptions, I haven't built a project because I wanted to learn something or I wanted to use a specific part. Like, I build the projects because I want the thing, and I want the thing for a specific reason. It doesn't usually play out that way, but
this is an interesting contrast though, because earlier in the show you said what I like is the money, but this is also like a very like principled stance of like I want to build things that help improve the world. So it's like those two don't necessarily meet. You know,
I mean, not every way of making money screws people.
no,
Like
sure, it's not always a zero
at
sum
the end
game.
of the
Yeah,
day,
yeah.
at the end of the day, the reason why at the end of the day, the reason why we have this association between like a growing economy and technology is because technology technology lets you make it lets you improve things to such a degree where basically you can make value without having to pull it out of someone else's pocket with it, instead of like
Mm-hmm.
me making money by selling a log that
Mm-hmm.
I had to make sure no one else could hack that tree down first.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, like, I'm multiplying the amount of work someone can do per day by
Sure.
50%. So
Right.
that
Or you.
person, so like I'm making money. Basically I'm getting a part of a pie that didn't exist before. This
Got it.
has been really abused, by the way. Like, this has been used to rationalize a lot of terrible, a lot of like really predatory things. I try to be like, I guess like you have to really be both. I think you have to, like you gotta pay the bills. You have to have enough of a war chest that you can, deal with emergencies and seize opportunities. But at the same time, like, you got to find ways to do it that don't involve selling your soul. Otherwise, I'd feel terrible about myself.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah. Okay.
does it make it harder? Yeah, I'm playing everything. Sometimes it feels like I'm doing everything in hard mode,
Mm.
but it makes it worth it. As
Yeah.
for um
I wasn't
yeah,
really calling it out like, oh, you're like mentally conflicted type of thing. I just say it's interesting because it is like you have these very interesting views on the like that technology should move things forward, and that you're featuring things that are hopefully moving the world's knowledge forward too. So it's
yeah,
great.
and helping people get more stuff. Look, technology is just depends technology makes stuff more efficient,
Hmm.
and it's up to you whether like it's up to the user whether, for instance, they use that to do to do a baseline amount of work with less skills, or
Hmm.
whether they give it to someone who's already excellent to make them super excellent, or whether they use it to fire part of their staff, right? Or
Hmm.
whether
Hmm.
they use it to get people who like whether they use it to fire the members of their staff who they can't control and replace them with people they can, or whether they use it to make things that they could otherwise never make before, or sell the same product for cheaper, right? It all comes
Hmm.
down to which direction you're pointing it in.
Yeah. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you make
Totally.
a
Yeah.
chip that's like, I think like Moore's law. I like this Moore's law is like the ultimate expression of this, right? Like, people think that Moore's law says that chips get, chips double in speed every 18 months, but that's not true. It's chip density doubles every 18 months. So it's up to the manufacturer whether they want to use that extra power to double the speed, or to have the battery consumption, or to make 50% more on with the same piece of
That's right.
silicon.
Yep. Yep.
So like, technology is all like, it's all how you use it. It's which direction you point it.
Hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, you can't always know that from the outset either. You never know what the effect is going to be.
Yeah. Well, so this mindset, I mean, so how do you see this impacting your channel in the future and things you want to build? Like what are some of the
Hmm.
things you're hoping to build in the near term, short term, long term,
The way this affects the channel is that one of my soft rules. This is I've broken it. It's a soft rule, is that I try not to make useless projects. I try to make sure that every project ostensibly has a use, and that
Hmm.
use ostensibly kind of makes sense. In part because they're the types of projects that I get excited to make.
Yeah.
Uh, but also because, I mean, the side of making that involves like shocking yourself, shocking your friends, shocking you whenever you say a word, shocking something at a distance, shocking something from orbit, shocking something with a dog, making the dog piss beer and then shock you. I can't compete with that. It's been done to death.
Ah,
So that's kind of the flavor. So this is kind of like the bedrock. Every project that I come up with starts with some idea of something I could do with it.
mm,
Um,
that's great.
and
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's
there's
kind of
actually a
how it
purpose.
manifests.
People can kind of see themselves in it, see their own
Yeah,
desires and wants in it.
it
Yeah.
also kind of justifies existence. It makes people feel a little better about watching it.
Yeah. That's
Um,
great.
Gets people's heads spinning, and it also kind of centers the project in the video. Kind of gives it a story. Like, if I were building a project that were like, I don't know, if I were building a Nerf blaster that shoots a charged capacitor to shock me, like, I got to spend part of that video either explaining why I'm doing this, or make a very goofy and infantile video that like justifies that tone.
Mm,
Um, it's, I don't know, it kind of makes me feel bad too. But
Mm.
the yeah, like upcoming projects. I have a bad habit of promising to make videos in my videos and then not making them, because
Yeah.
the topics I make depend a lot on the sponsor I get for the video. I try to integrate the two so that, like, I seem like less of a shill and the sponsor does better, and the people feel less compelled to whip out their phones and skip ahead by 90 seconds. Uh, but yeah, the ones that I promised I have to do, I have to make a new heads up display.
Mm.
That one, I said I would make one that's easier to build. I have not found a good display to build it off that costs less than $800, and I
Oh my
think
gosh.
it's
Yeah.
really gauche to make a DIY project that costs $1,000 in this economy. I feel like that would be a little uncool.
Mm.
So I've been putting that off. The cyber deck. I wish that video did better. That project is that project came out. It's one of my best projects.
Mm.
But that one I have to make. That one I'm actually planning that one out. That one's in the works for making a version that's easier for people to build themselves. Because
Mm.
a portable Raspberry a portable Raspberry Pi console, I think, is something that a lot of people could really get some value out of.
Mm.
So, that one's going to be great. I'm going to try to make it modular so you can pull the keyboard part out and just use it so basically, like, you can build the individual parts of the circuit that you want. Like, you'll be able to pull out the keyboard part and use it as a keyboard. You'll be able to just build the power part and use it as, like, a multi-voltage rail power, like USB power bank. The Raspberry Pi module itself will just be kind of like a mini tablet that you can use as a kiosk.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, look at my hacking.
And can you define cyberdeck for people who don't know what a cyberdeck
Oh,
is?
right, of course. This happens often. I often forget to explain something because I'm just so used to saying it. A cyber deck is sort of like an 80s style all-in-one computer. Cyber
Mm.
decks generally have a processor. Oh, look at that. I'm feeding Brooke a peep. This isn't going to make any sense to people listening to this on a podcast app.
They should
Anyways.
just go and watch it, though. We'll have links to everything. So,
Oh yeah, you got to go on the YouTube channel, like, comment,
Yeah.
subscribe.
That's right.
But the Cyberdeck is generally like an all-in-one computer with battery, screen, keyboard, often exotic things like like a wearable display or software-defined radio.
Mm.
Personally, I put in the extra constraint that it can't have a hinge because that would make it a laptop.
Oh, okay.
Generally they're if they are laptop, they're generally like ruggedized. It's sort of like an 80s style, like the type of thing like a hacker would bring when he would bring into the bathroom at Wayland Utani to break their ice and access their data.
Yeah,
they're really cool. They're really cool projects.
They did this in they did like a modified version of it in Die Hard 74 or whatever that one was with Justin Long. He had like a cyberdeck setup style. I mean, it was a laptop, but yeah, like he's like plugging into his phone and like that sort of thing. And
yeah, the cyberdeck community is. There is a cyberdeck community.
Is it like a /r/cyberdeck or something?
Yeah. And also the Discord, the Cyberdeck Discord is where it's at. It's called Cyberdeck Cafe. You can go to cyberdeck.cafe. There's a link there. It's so active. It's crazy active for such a niche project. You have like thousands of members, and it's like each, their most popular boards have like hundreds of chat messages a day. It's ridiculously active community.
Wow.
Yeah, the cyberdecks are pretty fun. I really want to make the cyberdeck project to like something other people can make, because frankly, if I see one more Raspberry Pi laptop built into a Pelican case, I'm going to destroy the internet. And I'm going to just find where that internet thing is, and I'm just going to rip all the wires out of it. I'm going to go to their house. I'm going to knock on their door, and I'm going to explain my situation calmly. Yeah. Let me see other projects. I got to make more stream stuff. These things.
So that's another thing that you do as well, right? So you do regular streams. People can check.
Yes,
this out.
I switched from doing 4 videos per month to 2 videos and 8 streams, and
that is intense.
It's so much easier. It's so much better. Streams are the pressure on a stream is so little compared to a video. Making a video in a week, especially even if you make a video in a week, especially a video that requires you to make hardware for it, is bananas. It's such a brutal death march. I do not know how even the talking head channels that talk about YouTube drama over little animated like stick figures or whatever. I don't even know how they do it. It's a ridiculous cadence. 2 weeks is so much better. I get an entire week to build my project. And the streams help kind of make up for some of the, they make up for, they kind of keep me current in people's minds. They make a couple extra bucks to help bridge the gap. But more than that, they show an aspect of the construction process that I can't put in videos.
Because it wouldn't be punchy enough, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be fun to watch, and it's also not what a lot of people want to watch.
Right.
Like,
right.
they're great. Like, all right, great. Here's another YouTube thing. So before I used to let me know if I'm going too far off topic. I know we've been talking for like
this is
an
great.
hour and change. All right, so before I started building electronics and realized, and the skies parted, and we're like, Zack, you should do this like a lot. Before I did that,
yes, biblical references, right?
Right, before all that happened, I wanted to go into video game development and game design. So I got really deep in game design, and one of the principles that you learn in game design and game feel is, I don't know if it has a name, but I call it the horse riding principle. So company makes some Japanese company, I forget who, makes a horse riding game. They make like an equestrian racing game, and they design that game to be like as close to a simulation of actually being a jockey as possible. Like they send people out to the races.
What kid hasn't wanted to grow up to be a jockey, like,
right. It was like, it was during like, the Sim Cities days, like, people like sim games. So they wanted to make a sim, like a jockey simulator. So they talked to horse racers. They actually went out and rode themselves. They did motion studies, and they put people down in front of the game, and they say, this game sucks. This doesn't feel like what horse racing is. Like this doesn't feel like horse racing. It feels like I'm doing something else. And they're, they look at each other, and one of the junior developers searches for like horse movie on Google or whatever, and just quickly whacks together a prototype that plays like a horse movie, or like a horse race on TV, how that looks. And the playtesters loved it. So that's the thing, like when you're doing, so the moral of the story here is, when you're doing media, you're not providing an accurate you should not provide an accurate representation of the thing. You should provide an accurate representation of what people think the thing is. So my show isn't about the prototyping process. It's about what people think the prototyping process is.
Doesn't that perpetuate stereotypes, though? And
there's nothing you can do about it.
Interesting. And that's I guess one thing you could do, though, is you get people interested enough that they come and check out the stream, and then they see the real thing, right?
In part, there's the stream, yeah, and also I make it a point to break it. I make it a point to break immersion as like fairly often, and kind of like
break the fourth wall and be like, actually, this isn't it, sort of thing.
I call it breaking the second wall, because I'm breaking the wall between the writer's room and the stage. So it's so every once in a while, like I'll do something like, we'll be telling the story about like how I came up with this feature, and then, oh crap, I realized I can't fit all the wiring in the back of this oscilloscope, so I scrapped this whole part. Like stuff like that, to kind of show that, there are hidden complexities. But yes, the streams let me kind of get part of that in there. What people want to see, what people think is authentic, is Iron Man. They think that I come up with some crazy idea, and I head to the lab and smash things together, and they're 3D things spinning around, and they're 3D prints building up out of nowhere. Oh yeah, people love the time lapses.
Oh yeah,
and that's what they think it is.
The machine says, this will be done in 6 hours. I'm going to go machine a ton of stuff out of metal, and it'll be done in 6 hours. So come on back, then it'll be complete.
If I had to explain like how long 3D prints take in my videos, oh man, like it makes it hard. So that's a tricky part of the streams, is like I often will have to start a print but finish it later, because it's a 3D print. It takes 6 hours.
Sure.
But it's not so much giving people the wrong impression. It's so much making people feel like it's accurate. Remember, people don't know whether it's accurate or not. People have to feel like it's accurate.
So is it any part of your mission to bring people into the field?
No,
like that first prototype that like
no, it's not. That's actually like I have this list of I wrote this list out of ways I'm gonna like kind of like rules to kind of focus my channel. And no, it's not. Even though I seem to be very effective at it.
Sure. Yeah.
No, because like virtually every maker channel, especially the educational ones, is about how to get started.
Sure.
I mean, like nearly all of them. They're
I
all about
actually
how to get started.
I actually don't. I don't mean like how to do X, or like how to get into Blinky, right? That's a
Yeah.
video I have, right? I'm actually saying to inspire to go somewhere else and find it, or just to go and like
Oh yeah, I want
start,
people to make projects.
right. So the first thing that you said, well, I saw this thing on Hackaday with a heads-up display, and I
Yeah.
couldn't not build it, right? That is something I have talked to a lot of people building a lot of things, and if
That's
there's
where they
one
get
thing
started.
aside from the fact that people always say Lego, like you joked about, the other thing they say is I just couldn't not do. I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't resist. I had to put this thing in the world, and that is such a common thread.
Wait till you get the Gen Z people in. They're gonna be talking about Iron Man. They're gonna be talking about Minecraft and Roblox.
Hey, Minecraft. If you know, yeah, for the Minecraft crowd, I'm not. I can't do video games personally. I get super addictive. But if you get someone who then flips the switch and says, you know what, actually, I want to build this in the real world, or I built an entire, those crazy people that build an entire CPU in Minecraft. It's like, man,
It's
okay,
crazy.
cool, but it's that's a switch over, right? It's that switch between I'm watching this thing, I'm a consumer, to I want to be a creator, and that's a tough thing to do, but people like you have made that switch, and I'm assuming that you're also converting others, maybe not on purpose though. That's what I'm kind of getting at.
Yeah, it happens. It's tricky. The kind of the guiding principle of the channel is finish more projects.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's
Sure.
kind of like the
mantra.
yeah, it's the message I want to get across. Finish more projects. And
that's a great message.
But like but like it's got a bit of a fine point on it, because I'm not saying make more things, right? I'm not saying start more projects. I'm not saying learn to make things. I'm saying take the projects that you have already started and finish them.
Yeah, push them across.
Like if you haven't started a project, all right, well, enjoy the show. If you have started a project, I want you to finish it, and I want you to see how close you are to it being done.
Yeah.
But like I think a part of that is a lot of folks on the Discord, like a lot of folks on the Discord, and in a few comments, say something along the lines of like, I thought this stuff was impossible, but you showed me it's merely hard, so I got into it.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's a great message. I think there are a lot of folks who say, I think there are a lot of folks who get the message across that like, this is easy and you can do it, or or like, if you go to engineering school, this is what you'll be able to do.
Yeah.
But I feel like I somehow ended up being like, I end up being one of the few people saying like this is not a particularly difficult project, although it is what's the way of saying it? Like, it's, I guess I said it before, it's hard. It's really hard, but it's not impossibly hard. And here's how you can start attacking it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of neat. I never really thought of that. I don't know. I got kind of burned out on beginners when I was when I ran that I got burned out on beginners running classes at the Hoboken Maker Bar at that hackerspace I helped co-found. Yeah, because I don't like doing stuff for beginners. No offense to any of the beginners out there. I just don't care about you.
I think
no,
I think it's tough. It's tough because it is the same thing over and over. I think the people that are into it are like, they love the process, right? They love the seeing people cross that threshold, or like repeating their process over and over again and refining it and trying to get people across that line. But that doesn't necessarily strike me as your.
I got theories.
Okay, all right.
I think a lot of folks. I think there's the reason why there's such a focus on beginner content. I have a hypothesis that it's because a lot of folks who make those videos are insecure, and they haven't, like, they don't think they can make advanced stuff. It's some combination of, they don't think that they're qualified to make advanced stuff, and they don't think they can make advanced stuff fun to watch. But like,
he's playing on all my fears.
Look, I do this very often. The show has a dark streak in it. Like, you have to stare into the abyss. You have to confront the dark.
This is Zack being like, that thing, the painful thing that you're supposed to do first, all of the things that you're supposed to get out of the way in a prototyping process. This is you doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, that's
running towards the pain.
It's the nature of the game. You what was I going on?
Beginners.
It was a really good point. Oh, right. The thing that bugs the hell out of me about beginners, it's not so much teaching the same thing over and over again, right? Like, if anything, you get more effective at that over time.
Sure. Yeah.
it's that very few beginners will ever go beyond that. Very few people will ever use the things you learn. Like, so at the Fab Lab, right? I ran a whole bunch of beginner classes and I ran all the open houses. And you'd think that after taking beginner classes, people would start showing up to the open houses because now they can start building projects. So they showed up, like they would show up to learn the basics, and then they bring their project and show up to get some help, uh, keep moving it forward. We made it very clear that people can do this, but folks almost never showed up. The overlap between the classes and the open house events actually ran the opposite direction. People would show up to the open house events and then go to the classes.
Huh. So,
yeah.
So what was preventing them from, is it the self-talk of like, I can do this, or I can map this to the thing I actually want to be doing?
I think in part, I think there are a lot of things that manifest this. In one, I don't think a lot of folks who take a class have a genuine interest in using it. I think a lot of folks just take a class just to see what it's about, or to see what all, just to get their feet wet, or to see if it's or it's not a negative thing necessarily. It could be like they just want to see if this is something they're really interested in.
I've had so I gave some courses or classes at DEF CON on like KiCad, the thing I teach a lot on my channel, and it was like in person. I was really nervous about it the first time, and so I asked people like, "Why are you here?" And they're like, "Well, the seat was open."
Yeah, right. Like a lot of folks a lot of beginners just are not. They've a lot of beginners. Very few beginners are beginners because they intend to use that as a stepping stone to being experts. Most people are beginners just because they're curious, and that goes double for something like YouTube, where people will get recommended the video out of the blue. Someone will be looking at this happens fairly often. Someone's looking at 3D printed firearms, like actual real steel pew pew weaponry, and they get recommended my 3D printed Nerf video. They have no interest in 3D printing. They have no interest in Nerf. It's an algorithmic glitch that brought them there. So that just bugs me. I don't like the idea of putting, like, I don't.
So you're saying you would never follow that on with and let's go step by step on how to build your first Nerf gun. You're saying that's what you're kind of getting at here.
I don't think. Well, yeah, I just wouldn't want to, because like it just really bugs me that very few people would use that as a very few people go beyond that. People be like, oh, this is neat, and then they'll never touch it again. And that some I don't want to waste my time in that.
So some do. So maybe let's focus on some of the positives.
The positives. So I have my working theory here is that very few people who are genuinely interested in a topic will take beginner classes, because I think people's interest propels them beyond the beginner stage on their own, and then they like the water, so they jump into the pool on their own, and then in their paddling they find themselves like neck deep in the deep end, and they need to take some.
I could use a swim class. Yeah, okay, yeah, I could use some floaties.
And so I think people pass that on their own, and it's the intermediate stuff. It's like, okay, I have bits and pieces here and there, right? I bought an Arduino. I followed the instructions to make the LED blink. I tried to make a robot, but every time I plugged a servo directly into the IO pin, it made the computer explode. Like, what am I supposed to go from here? Like, that's what you really want to see. It's on top of that, the hottest Zack Freedman hot take, the one that
we're here for.
I've been trying to do. Yes, I like the enthusiasm. I've been trying to figure out a way to get this into a video, but I think engineering in general, electronics and programming specifically, are intrinsically solitary. There's this whole idea that we're a community and people build off the work of each other, and it's when I found the welcoming community that got me really into it. I'm not going to say it's BS, but I think it's peripheral. I think at the end of the day, engineering is something you do yourself in solitude at a workbench for hours into the night, every once in a while talking to someone about it.
Right, usually being like, I just can't get this.
Sometimes I think a lot of people, though, like that's the last time they want to talk to someone. They don't want to let people know how rough of a time they're having. I
talk very often about how big a component ego is in engineering, both in design reviews, in terms of seeking help, in terms of
it exists.
It's a huge problem, but also I think some of it, there is some positive to it. Like that's also what pushes people through. That's also what drives people.
Yeah,
so,
it's it's part of what makes people smash their heads. You have to kind of be a bit of a loser to have have the solitude and time to just smash your head against a problem
Mm. Or get lucky,
over
right?
and
I
over
mean,
again.
I think I got very lucky in that I was put in a situation where I could do that at work. That's the only
Yeah.
reason. Yeah, I was able to do that.
Usually this happens during people's free time, especially when they're younger. And
Mhm.
if you are not, if you're, I'm gonna be honest, if you're not a loser, you're not gonna have a lot of free time to bash your head against this, to
Right. Hanging
figure
out
out
at
like
parties, you're going to
if you're
coffee shops with
you're
people.
doing all your homework, you're playing sports,
Right.
you're doing the debate club after school. It's the sheer volume of time you need is crazy. I suspect this is why, at least for now, you see a lot more guys than see a lot more people who identify male as people who identify female in making,
Mm.
because I think it's like, and this is not grounded in anything. This is just my I've been trying to figure out why there's such a gender discrepancy for ages, because I would really like to
Right. I
close
mean,
it. There's no reason half
you
the
look at your channel,
population.
you're like 95% male. It's like, okay, come
It's
on.
not. It's actually 97 and change.
Okay. Well, yeah, right. And it's like,
But there's no reason for it. Like, half the population is just cutting themselves off from a phenomenal hobby for no reason. I've been trying to bash my head against it. I
mm.
suspect that it's because I think guys just have a easier time being complete rejects as kids. I suspect, and on top of that, I think I think that component ego factors into it too. Like, like a lot of folks feel the need to like a lot of folks feel the need to it's tricky to articulate in a way that doesn't sound mean, because it's not mean. It's a personality trait.
Mm.
It's But like, a lot of folks feel the need to take themselves to the highest possible level before they show their face, and they
Mm.
feel the need to like keep their just to kind of keep their like yeah keep your failures to yourself, and in the process you'll learn way more than you should,
Mm.
like way more than you need to. It's not a good thing. I want to be very clear here. It's a
Yeah,
waste of
right.
time.
Yeah, yes.
But I suspect it
It's like
factors into it.
quiet desperation, right? I mean, that's what it is. And then,
Yeah.
but with a learning component, you know?
With a progress component,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess, like, learning I think it's more of a matter of luck, really, whether you need it again. But yeah, it's just a guess.
Mm.
I think this brings up one of the most critical questions of being an online maker, is like, what's it like to put yourself out there?
Mm. And?
Like, I think this is the one that I get asked often on stream.
Okay.
I think it's completely identical to not putting yourself out there. I Nothing will protect. No,
Oh.
the snide comments will come. The jerks will arrive. The know-it-all dudes. Know-it-all dudes like lurk in every technically sophisticated corner. It's the nature of the game.
You're saying
You can't
if
hide from them by keeping your stuff private. No
yes,
matter how good your project is, you will never outrun the criticism. They
that's
will
right.
always find you. So it doesn't matter how good your project is. It doesn't matter whether you keep it private or make it public, because the douches are going to find you, and making it public actually increases the percentage of people who have positive things to say to people who have negative things to say, because
Interesting.
before, the people who have positive things to say will never find you, right? The people with negative things to say go out of their way to find things to rag on.
Interesting.
Like, before I did what should I call it, before I started doing the YouTube, the only comments I would ever get on, like, posts on Hackaday, on
Yeah, GitHub
on my
repos and
GitHub,
similar.
they're all vitriolic.
Mm.
And now it's actually a lot more balanced.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So,
so it's
so
actually a net
Zach
upside.
says, put your stuff out there because you'll find fewer a-holes.
Well, I mean, you'll increase the volume of you'll increase the number of jerks,
Sure,
but you will
but percentage-wise.
much more orders of magnitude increase the number of supportive people, and you'll be
Mm.
surprised both how little it takes to get people to say positive, just to get positive responses,
Mm-hmm.
and how much it takes to deflect negative responses.
Mm.
Because like, I get people asking all the time, like, oh man, I screenshot them. I love some of these. They're so creative in how mean they are. But for a lot of them, they're like, take off that stupid Google Glass. It wasn't take off your stupid Google Glass. It wasn't popular. It was useless in 2012, and it was just as useless now. and I come and I like, reply and say, hey, this is my teleprompter. I did an entire video on it. Or when people say like, oh man, people talk about like how poorly the 3D printer is tuned. Like for the 3D printer episode, right? Like the meta prints, which I actually start with which I actually like, I deliberately make the 3D printer worse as a joke. And I say that in the video, but people don't watch the video. They make their comment before they do. The number of comments, like, I guess to put the finest possible point on this, I get tons of comments saying like, hey, that's a really hey, that part's really stupid. Why would you do that? And then edit, wait a second, like that he explained it. It's actually really smart. Or you should, or why didn't you make one of these? You like the smartwatch. Someone's like, why didn't you put a battery backup in it, you idiot? And then edit. I didn't realize the circuit board was so jam packed. like people are going to be nasty without even knowing what they're being nasty about. Like, just there's no defense against them. It's just it can be psychologically hard, but it's not as hard as it sounds.
It sounds like kind of getting over the hump and like the
kind of
it's
seeing
not a natural
reality.
Inclination, but once you do it, then you realize that it's like, oh, okay, this is.
It's more like hearing a barking, snarling dog. And yes, there is a barking, snarling dog, but it's actually a Chihuahua, and it's 8 inches tall. It's if you're not going public with your stuff, like you're leaving things on the table for no reason.
But it seems like in a an isolated field, if every electronics person is that weirdo stuck in the lab, the putting stuff out there actually helps to build some community. I mean, you're still going to have to put time in on the bench, but it can build community. It can bring you closer.
Yeah.
It can, introduce you to weirdos on Twitter like me and you, and get us interacting, right? I mean,
yeah, you also never know which part of the project someone's going to care about, right?
Right.
Like, I got 8,000 lines of code in the smartwatch project, but the only one I think anyone will ever use is the part that generates the random flavor text. Like, I've got people like whatchamacallit? I've got a whole lot of interest from the first person video drone flying community. I never even touched a drone in my life, but a lot of people want a one-eyed heads-up display so they can keep an eye on their helicopter. Yes, I'm so cool. On their quadricopter when they're flying it. So like, you never know what aspect of the project people are gonna care about. You might have inadvertently solved someone else's problem, just incidentally.
Yeah, serendipity lurking in your project.
Yeah, like the idea of using Hall sensors as flex sensors in the glove. Like someone made a really cool keyboard with that. They never thought that was something you could do, but it turns out to be very fast and accurate. When you share your stuff, you never know what's going to happen. You never know who's going to be affected by it, and I think it's part of the fun part. It tends to take on a life of its own, especially if you do use a permissive license. Especially if you're using Creative Commons or MIT and you're actually letting people modify it. Then. It's best. It's the best.
So, Zach, where can people find some serendipity in your project? Where can they find your stuff?
Oh, I mean, if you want to find the videos, I mean, the videos and the streams are where it's at. You go to youtube.com/Zack Freedman. That's Zack, CACK. Just search for Zack Freedman. I tag all my videos with every possible spelling of Zack Freedman Void Star Labs, so it'll show up.
That's great.
The best video to watch first. I think for this, for this group, my recent video on the Singularitron smartwatch, I would agree with that. Yeah, I think is the one that the audience is going to love.
Yeah, it's got all the sensors and it's got everything kind of plugging in and modularity and things like that. So
this giant 6-inch long modular smartwatch, it's great. YouTube.com/Zack Freedman. You can also chat with me on Discord. It's discord.gg/VoidStarLab. Oh, of course. I do videos every couple weeks, but I also do live streams every Monday, every Friday, starting at noon Mountain Time. That's 1800 UTC. Yeah, 1800 UTC. Yeah, every Monday, every Friday, we build projects and shoot the bull. I'm also on all kinds of social media, Zack Freedman. But yeah, get on YouTube. That's where the cool stuff is.
That's right. All right. Well, we'll have links to all that stuff down below. And Zack, thanks for joining us here and giving us your perspective on life and prototyping and
learning how to build stuff and put more projects out in the world and finish more
Yes,
projects.
finish more projects. Don't start new ones, finish the old ones. Thanks a lot for having me. It's been a blast.